On Tuesday, President Trump, in a press conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said, quote, "The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it." This soundbite has basically taken over the internet, with many asking, what does this even mean? Well, for some official details, let me bring in Israeli Consul General Israel Bachar to tell us more. Israel, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so just let's talk about it. Is this even possible? What does this even look like?
Well, I think that Trump is making history again. We experienced history with President Trump after the Abraham Accords. Nobody believed that it's achievable to have this accord, and he succeeded. So we need to give him credit as a doer, as somebody that knows what he does. And for sure, this time, I think that President Trump, which is the greatest friend of Israel that we ever had in the White House, as the Prime Minister said, I think he's coming with a fresh outlook to a very complicated issue, and he's courageous with a very moral clarity standing that also beneficial to the Gazans. And his plan is basically saying something very simple and even a little bit historic. So if we compare the Marshall Plan in Germany, that American initiated in Germany in 1945, which basically said that America is going to take over Germany for a certain period of time and help to, one, denazification the society in Germany, and two, help economically to rebuild Germany and make it a democracy again. And that's basically, I see a lot of similarities to what's happening right in Gaza. One, we need to denazification the society in Gaza, which is they're based on the radical Islam, Hamas propaganda and beliefs. And two, we need to give an economic positive future to the Gazan people. So I think this plan benefits the most the Gazan people. Trump released them from the oppression and from the aggressions of Hamas by using them as human shields, by terrorizing its own people and preventing from them to have a normal life. The only way for them to have a normal life is if you relocate them, as Trump said, for many years, like from 5 to 10 years, rebuild Gaza, and then they have a better future. Otherwise, the other option is more death, destruction, and no future for their society, for the kids. Mm-hmm. So by doing so, Hamas is going to be neutralized, and the Gazan people are going to have a far better future for themselves. And security for Israel, of course.
Right, of course. So the question that we get a lot in the comment sections and people are wondering is what happens, and you've kind of mentioned this, what happens to the nearly 2 million Gaza civilians? You know, there's been talks about them being moved to Egypt, to Jordan, to other countries. And then there's maybe a confusion. Does that mean temporarily until this thing is built in Gaza? You know, Trump called it potentially the next Riviera. Is this a temporary measure? Is this a long-term measure? What do you see as the actual goal in the end for the population of Gaza?
First of all, we're not talking really about Egypt or Jordan. From what I'm hearing, we're talking about three different states. And here is now you're going to get your newsworthy piece. They're talking about one, Morocco, two, Somalia, and adjacent to Somalia, there's another area. It's called Puntland, and that's where they're looking at maybe to relocate them to these three places. So Egypt is not probably going to be in the play. It's still in the making, so we don't know the final details of it, but we do understand the historic principles that President Donald Trump is laying on the ground. There is a real realignment here of the Middle East, what's happening in the last year. So we see that what's going on in Iran, we see what's going on in Syria, we see what's going on in Lebanon, and with Yemen, and now with Gaza. So the president come with a really different approach. It's the first time that the American president says, in a very strong terms, if you attack a democratic nation as Israel, and you think that you're gonna continue to hold this land in order to create another attack on Israel, I'm gonna take from you this land, and by doing so, I'm gonna eliminate and dismantle Hamas from having the Gaza Strip and having the ability to control the Gazan people. It is a humanitarian approach, a different approach. It's going to benefit the Gazan and give more security to Israel. And hopefully, it's going to bring more stability in our region. Because really, Hamas wants to radicalize and destabilize the Middle East. And we, the free nation, the democratic nation, the people who believe in the Judeo Christian alliance and values, needs to make sure that the radical Islam is not taking over the Middle East, period. And that's the goal, and that's what he does in a very clear, strong terms. And I give him credit for it.
Well, as the Israeli consul general, obviously your job is to communicate the government of Israel's positions to the United States, to a Western audience. So I want to give you this opportunity, which is, if you see a lot of things online, TikTok's not the greatest of places, but a lot of things are being said about what Israel is doing, has done, will do in Gaza. I don't have to tell you the words or the adjectives. You know them as well as anybody. What would your message be to the next generation of Americans or the Western audience? What would you hope that they know that maybe they don't understand or are not receiving the full truth?
I think one of the conclusions that we have of October 7th, that if your enemy is saying he's going to do something to you, believe them. Don't try to take his words and understand it in different meaning. So if Iran is saying that it's going to go after America and after Israel, and America is the big side and Israel the small side, and they want to wipe out Israel for good, so we need to believe Iran that that's the real aim. And if they're holding American hostages or funneling money to terrorist organizations across the globe, including in Israel and including in Gaza, and more than 40 Americans in Gaza since October 7th, so they're the enemy. And you need to believe to their preaching and to their beliefs and to their aggressions, what they are doing. And we need to start to look at things as they are and not try to have a different philosophy and try to rationalize radical ideas and say that they are normal. We don't normalize radical ideas. We need to look at them as they are. And if they are not in the norm of the democratic, Western, Judeo-Christian values, I think you need to be aware that something is wrong. And the president coming and saying to us, something is wrong, I'm going to look at it differently. And I give him credit.
Well, obviously, you are a very busy man, so I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do have one final question. Obviously, President Trump has been a very busy man, from Iran executive decisions, defunding UNRWA, withdrawing from the United Nations Human Rights Council. I could go on and on and on. In your estimation, what do you think has been the most significant, or one or two things, the most significant thing that President Trump has done now in less than a few weeks of being in the Oval Office?
I think the most important thing is that he said, I'm going to do things differently. I'm not going to go with the general diplomatic norms for the last 70 years and try all the time to sell the same things in different language. I'm going to change the reality, look at the reality right now in the way that it is. So look, for the last 70 years, for the last 60 years, people are pushing on us all the time the two-state solution, which is a false from the beginning. But they're pushing on us. Every administration tried to push it on Israel in different ways, shape, and forms. And here's coming a president that says, hey, it's not viable. It's not the right course to take. And let's look at things differently. And first of all, we need to eradicate the terror regime in the region, which is in Gaza, the Hamas, or in Iran. And we need to go after them. And we need to make sure, if you want to have a real peace in the region, if you really want to have a democratic values in the region, you need to fight these terrorists. And that's what he does. And I think that's the main issue, not to take the old conventional thinking, and continue with it in different ways, shape, and forms. He's changing the paradigm in diplomacy, in reality, and in moral clarity. So by doing so, I think we have a very positive future in the Middle East. And I do believe that with his leadership and the leadership of the Prime Minister Netanyahu, we're going to achieve peace with Saudi Arabia, which is going to transform not only the economic reality in the region, but it will create a more understanding between the Islam world and the Judeo-Christian world to speak a moderate language and not a radical language.
So you mentioned it. So one micro question: do you see that happening anytime soon? A normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel?
That's my personal assessment. That's not official assessment. I believe 2025 it's going to be an historic year for us for sure. I think since the inception, the creation of the Israel in 48, I think the 2025 year is going to be our second biggest year.
Okay. Okay. Well, Israel, toda rabah. Thank you for your
Thank
time. I know
you.
you're a busy man, so thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much.